All right, exploration 4. This one's pretty cool because it's actually exclusively about weather in California. So, this talks about how in California, there's lots of temperature and climate differences in California. It's a really large state. And if you look at the satellite image, you can see we've got everything from, up here in the north, especially along the north coast where there's redwoods and it's super green, and we have like Mount Shasta and everything up here, all the mountains. We've got the valley, and then you get down to Southern California and you have essentially deserts. The whole thing is deserts. So this satellite image shows vegetated areas along the Pacific coast along here and the western edge of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So this is the Sierra Nevada mountains, right? Like you drive through if you're going to Tahoe, and the west side of them is green, and this side is not. So the western edge, these areas generally receive more precipitation than the brown areas, which are to the east of California's mountains, such as the Mojave Desert and the Great Basin. If any of you have ever driven through Nevada, it's really boring, but it's just driving endlessly through it, just like dirt, basically. And then you can generate some questions. Think about this map. Some things you might think about is why is it that on the western sides of the mountains it is green and on the eastern sides it's dry? Even right here, right? Even on the Coast Range, right? You look to the left, if this is another range, it's much smaller than the Sierra Nevada range, but the west side of this is green and then the right side is dry. So why, both cases, why is that? And another thing is a connection to make is just, it is more green where it rains more. It rains more in Northern California. It doesn't rain as much in Southern California. It's dry, it's green. Move along. So this is talking about, paragraph is talking about how vegetation patterns can indicate types of weather that an area has. So, going up here, you can kind of figure out the types of weather just by looking at satellite imagery, because you can see how, on average, a dry place versus a green place, the green place has more moisture, maybe even areas like this where it's super dry, it receives more sunlight, things like that. Now, prevailing winds. Prevailing winds influence weather because they affect the speeds and directions of moving air masses. And this talks about the Pacific Ocean. So one of the things that drives weather in California particularly is the prevailing winds of the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you look over here, you can see how prevailing means, mostly. And you see how, in general, most of the wind is traveling in this direction. So it doesn't stop. The atmosphere doesn't just stop when it hits land. It's kind of continues. It kind of continues along. I wish they had shown the arrows going a little bit farther. But, the air is kind of continuing in this type of direction. So you can see also how the currents affect that as well, right? We have warm currents, cold currents. So down here, both prevailing winds and the continent North America influence the direction of the North Pacific Current and the California Current. California Current brings cold water along the coast of California. If you've ever been to the beach, right, California is right here. This is Baja California, which is part of Mexico. California pretty much ends like right here. And, if you've been to the beach, it's really cold water. It's not like if you're in Hawaii. See, Hawaii is over here, warm currents, it's warmer out here. Or if you've been on the East Coast into those beaches, it's warmer. Prevailing winds blow cool and humid air masses that form over the Pacific Ocean towards the east. So it's going in to the east. When it means towards, it means it's going from the west, it's going to the east. and therefore the Pacific Ocean is a major influence on California's weather. So because all the wind that California gets is essentially wind coming from the Pacific Ocean, the temperature of the currents in the ocean have a major effect on our weather. Now this one talks about how do land forms. So one of the important things here is the phenomenon, I'll highlight it, a phenomenon known as the rain shadow effect happens when prevailing winds bring humid air over mountains. So here we have a picture of the Pineapple Express, which is, yes, it is a movie, I think, but it's also an atmospheric river where it's picking up the moisture over the ocean and it carries it over California. It's kind of going in like this. Come on, come on, come on. It's kind of going in like this direction, usually. So, in the tropical Pacific Ocean, warm ocean water enters the atmosphere by the process of evaporation. So, over the ocean, the warm water is evaporating into the air. And then the winds are blowing the air filled with moisture over California. And then it's going to condense over California. And this is essentially how this happens. And so this example is showing, this is kind of the main takeaway of weather in California. So if you think about the image in California, and then it has kind of a graphic here, and this is using the coast. So this mountain range is supposed to be kind of talking about, like, let's say that you're along here, right? We're on the coast range. So there's mountains all along here, right? If you ever drive to San Francisco, you kind of go up some hills that they're not quite as big as the Sierra Nevada mountains, but mountains nevertheless. So we're talking about the coast range here. So what happens is we have warm air, and the warm air, right, because of the previous lessons, we know that warm air can hold more water in the air. So the warm air moves up it's not moving up, it's just hitting the mountain and then it goes up to travel over it, right? So as it travels up, this wind, this air that's warm and has lots of moisture starts going up in elevation. As it goes up, that air is going to cool down. And if you remember that, that chart where it had the relative humidity, and it went like this, right? When it was warm, you could have lots of water, and the humidity would be 100%. But as it got colder, right, the air could hold less water. So as we go up, this air starts to be able to hold less water. So the water starts to condense, and it starts raining a lot. So, that's why even in the middle of summer, if you go to the Bay Area, it tends to be cooler, tends to be greener, tends to have more clouds, tends to rain more, stuff like that. Because it's raining all on the side of the mountain. Then the air begins its journey back down. So then it's up here. It's a lot of the moisture has been lost, and then it starts going down. Now there's a couple of reasons why it's dry on the other side, right? It's dry, first of all, because a lot of the moisture was lost in rain. And so the air just has less moisture in general, even up high, right? That's why it has the tiny clouds up here. Even up high, there's less moisture because it's already rained a bunch, so the humidity is going to be way lower. But then the air starts going down the mountain, or down to lower elevations, and as it goes down to lower elevations, it heats up, like this arrow is showing. And of course, as it heats up, right, the air starts heating up, it can hold more water again, so it's not going to be as likely to rain anyway. So because there's less water and the air can hold more water, those two reasons keep it from raining as much, so it ends up being really dry on the other side. And so you can actually see this a lot in the satellite imagery here, because if you were to zoom in or just imagine your own experiences, if you've driven around California, we have this coast range, and along the coast, it's pretty green. And then you go over the hills, right? You get into areas like Vacaville, Fairfield, even where we live, right, in the valley. The valley is much drier than the coast because as the air, kind of travels up and goes back down over the mountains, it's losing its moisture, so it's more dry. But then again, as the air then goes up over the Sierra Nevada mountains, which are even taller and bigger, and then go down the Sierra Nevada mountains towards Nevada, the process repeats. So that's why, when we start going up to Auburn, up towards Tahoe, it's a lot more green. But if you've ever gone, here's Lake Tahoe. If you've ever gone past Lake Tahoe into Nevada, it's completely dry. And the reason it's completely dry is because, most of the air goes through 2 cycles of raining and losing moisture as it goes along across California. So that's why Nevada is a dry place. Sorry, it's got to load. Think. This question down here on that page says something. Oh, here it goes. It's loading. Anyway, this last question I wrote. Oh, this was about those. It has those pictures where it has all those different winds. Right, there's it's not loading, but there's like winds coming from this way and this way and this way. Oh, there we go. So most of the California winds are coming from the maritime polar Pacific and the maritime tropical Pacific. These are the winds that are going across from the Pacific Ocean. These winds really are coming down, and so it's not that they can't affect us very much, but the winds on the Pacific would be pretty weak for these to be affecting us. These are mostly affecting the middle of the country. These are the East Coast, and these the West Coast. That's all.